Let me think about what I want to say. Okay. Hi there, this is Phil Simborg. I am one of the founders of the Backgammon Learning Center, where we have 10 teachers giving lessons online all over the world in 7 different languages. And we also give live lessons, group lessons, and so on. And I'm very proud to have with me one of my co-teachers and someone who's been with us, about 10 years now, John? Have we been together, would you say? 8 years?
Quite 10, maybe 4 or 5 years, so.
Oh, okay, 4 or 5 years. Well, typical. Now you know why I need John. My math is not very good. But John has been teaching, I think it's been more than 4 or 5 if you go back. But John O'Hagan is one of the better players in the world, but he's my go-to guy when I have questions about complicated cube action. And what we have here on the board is what to me was a complicated cube action. I was in a match, and I am red holding a 4 cube, and the score is we're playing a match to 9, and my opponent is winning 2-0. Now I keep the away score showing on my extreme gammon because in effect that's all that matters. So you can right click and show the away score. So blue is 7 away, and I am 9 away, and I'm holding a 4 cube and trying to decide whether or not to recube. And at first I thought it might be a very simple decision because I'm pretty much of a money player and have been playing for money 2-3 times a week for the last 40 years, mostly in Chouettes, and that's my go-to thinking, and then I try to adjust for match play. And for money, this is a no-brainer that this is not a double. I can see that red is not favored to win here in 2 seconds. But at the score, with a 4 cube being behind, my antenna goes up, and I know that it might be a double. By the way, I had just rolled double sixes the roll before in order to get into this position. I was in a fairly hopeless position when I took, not when I took the cube, but I got to a fairly hopeless position. These things happen. This is not a really weird happening. So the first thing I'd like to do is have John explain his thinking, how he approaches this over the board as he's playing the game at his level, which is going to be probably way over the head of many intermediate and lower level players, but advanced players I think will get a lot of insight on how to do what the shortcuts that John uses to decide whether or not to double in this position. And then afterwards, for those of you who might have been a little bit lost or awed, as I always am when John does this, we're going to go back and fill in the blanks. We're going to go a little slower. We're going to define some of the terms. So if you're an open player and you already know all about take points, doubling windows, match equity, and those kinds of computations, I think you're still going to enjoy the first part of this video. And then the last part of the video is for those of you who might not have been quite as experienced in all these areas. And I'm a fairly good open player with pretty good credentials. I ended up pretty good in the ABT a few times, and I get very confused on these. So I think even most open players can learn a lot from John. So take it away, John. You're red, you're me in this position. How do you decide whether or not to double?
All right, for the Kit-Woolsey rule, the first question you always ask is, are you sure the opponent has a take? Here it is just 100% clear that blue has a take. If you wanted to confirm that, you could do it pretty easily over the board. If red does redouble to 4, if black or if brown or what color is that, blue were to pass, then blue would be trailing 7 away, 5 away, and using Neil's numbers, he would have about 37% match winning chances. If blue were to take the 8 cube and lose this game, he would be trailing 7 away Crawford with about 9% match winning chances. And if he takes and wins, he wins the match with 100% match winning chances. So the take point would be 28 over 91. Now, you know that 27 over 90 is exactly 30%. So the 28 over 91 is a shade over 30%. And you can see at a glance that obviously blue wins way more than 30% here, because basically blue will win if red rolls one of his 31 non-jokers that take all 3 checkers off, and then he rolls a non-ace, which is 25 over 36. So 31 times 25 is way over 30% of 1296. So obviously it's a take. So the next question is, should red redouble? And the first thing to notice here is that this is very close to what's called a last roll of the game position. In other words, this is very likely the last chance that white will have to redouble to 8. Because notice that if, say for example, red rolls one of his 5 jokers that takes everything off the board, he wins the game. So the game's over. If, on the other hand, he rolls any of the other 31 numbers and then blue rolls any non-ace, blue wins the match. So basically, redoubling here is almost, not quite, but almost the last roll of the game position. The only time it's not a last roll of the game position is if, in a very unlikely sequence of red rolls 2-1, and then blue rolls any ace, and then red rolls another 2-1. But that's only about 1/10 of 1%, so it's not really worth worrying about.
Excuse me. So not only do we think of this as a last roll position, it's also clearly a dead cube position, which is important. That because the cube would be on 8 and blue only needs 7 points. There's no recube potential here.
Exactly. Yeah. The cube is definitely dead once you redouble to 8. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you figure out whether or not to redouble in a last roll of the game position? And the answer is that you should redouble as long as your winning chances are greater than your minimum redoubling point. Now, for example, in a money game, your minimum redoubling point on a last roll position would be 50%. So redoubling is correct if your chances are greater than 50%. So, for example, if you had 1 checker on the 5, 1 on the 2, that gives you 19 ways to win. The opponent's got, say, 2 checkers on the ace point. You should redouble, okay, because you're over 50%. And this is also true at most normal match scores, but not when you are trailing by a couple of points, as red is here, and you're thinking about redoubling to 8 in a short match. So you need to go through a 3-step process to figure out the minimum redoubling point. Number 1, you figure out the risk from redoubling. Number 2, figure out the gain from redoubling. And then calculate risk divided by risk plus gain. And we will use Neal's numbers for these match equity estimates over the board. So first of all, as far as figuring out the risk, if you don't redouble to 8 and you lose this game, the score will be 9 away, 3 away. You will be trailing 9 away, 3 away. Using Neal's numbers, that gives you about 16% match winning chances. If you do redouble and you lose this game, you lose the match with 0% match winning chances. So the risk from redoubling is 16%, the difference between 16% and 0. Now for the gain side, if you don't redouble to 8 here and you win this game, you will be ahead 5 away, 7 away with about 63% match winning chances, again using Neal's numbers. If you do redouble and win this game, you'll be ahead Crawford 7 away, which gives you about 91% match winning chances. So the gain from redoubling is then 28, which is the difference between 91% and 63%. So the formula, again, is risk divided by risk plus gain. So risk over risk plus gain is 16 divided by 16 plus 28, or 16 over 44, which is the same as, 4 over 11, which comes out to a little over 36%. So we know that white should redouble to 8 if his winning chances are greater than 36.4%. Okay, so how do we estimate that? Actually, you can figure out exactly. You've got the 5 doubles right away that win, plus if you roll any of the other 31 numbers and blue then rolls an ace, you also win. So the chance of your rolling any of the 5 doubles is 5 over 36. And the chance of your not rolling one of those and the opponent rolling and a losing ace is you have to roll 31 out of 36. The opponent has to roll another 11 over 36. So that comes to a total of 521 over 1296. Now, how do you estimate that in terms of percentages? Well, notice that 1296, 10% of that is about 130, right? And so 521 divided by 130 is about 4. So, in other words, you're a shade over 40%. Okay. So therefore, 40% is greater than 36%. The redouble and take is correct. If it came out exactly 36.4%, that tiny chance of your rolling 2-1, blue rolling a single ace, and then you rolling another 2-1 would make it barely correct not to redouble. But you are well over the 36.4% minimum redoubling point. So against an even player, redouble take is correct. If red is clearly the better player, it's probably not correct to redouble because this is a no-skill position. So that's how I would do it over the board.
Okay. Now, I'm going to have some questions and some comments and fill in some of the blanks. First of all, let me ask you, is this exactly the way you think and do it over the board?
Yes.
Okay. So the most obvious things that everyone needs to know is Neal's numbers, or have some method of estimating your match equity or match winning chances so that you can do the risk over risk plus gain or risk over risk plus reward computations for both sides, to know if you have a take and to know if you have a double. First of all, John's statement that this is obviously a take, the interesting thing is it is obviously a take, and it's a huge take because blue wins the game, as you can see, about 60% of the time. But even here, you can't take that for granted. There are some scores, and I checked it because I'm not a genius, where it would be a pass. If you are, for example, 2 away, 7 away, 2 away, 8 away, 2 away, 9 away, 2 away, 2 away, 9 away, 2 away, 10 away. Some of those higher scores, your take point is higher than 60%, and you actually would have a pass in some situations here. So don't just assume it's a take just because you're 60%. And in many other positions, you won't be 60%. The second thing I want to point out here is that John's way of determining how often blue wins is a little too complicated for me. I don't work very well with 1296. I have a shorter way that I think most people will find a little easier, because we're not all as good as John is at knowing how to come up with parts of 1296. And I'm sure John wasn't very good when he started, but he practiced it, learned some shortcuts, and learned how to do this. The way I do this to find out that blue has that red has 40% is I know he wins 5 times immediately if he rolls double 2, double 3, double 4, double 5, or double 6. And then of the remaining 31 rolls, I know that red is going to win about 31% of those 31 rolls, because he wins if rolling an ace is around 31%. So 31 on 31 is a no-brainer. That's a little bit more than 9 games. So I take those 9 games plus the 5 games that I would have won before, and I have 14 games out of 36. And I use that to come up with my estimate of winning chances. Well, here again, I'm not a genius at figuring out what 14 out of 36 is, because every 1 out of 36 is 2.778%. I can't multiply 14 times 2.778%, so here again I use a shortcut. I know that 2.778 is a little bit less than 3%. I'm sorry, 10% less than 3%. So if I multiply 14 times 3, that I can do. That's 42. And if I take off about 10%, which is about 4, I come up with about 38. So that way I would have estimated this to be around 38%, but I know that when I multiplied 31 times 31, it was a little bit more than 9, so I would have guessed probably 39 or 40%. It would have been pretty close that way. I find that method easier to do than using the 1296 formula. Use whichever one you're more comfortable with. They both work. They'll both get you close. And, of course, if you had the advantage of using a calculator, which you're not allowed to do over the board, you could come up with exact numbers. Now, I do want to tell you, anybody watching this video, if you shoot me an email, I will send you what John just said in writing, in detail, so that you can study it and learn it. And my email address is pjsimborg@gmail.com. So you can get this format. John took the time before this video to write out step by step what he did and how he made these computations. Here it is. And again, I will send it to you and help you learn this process. Now, I'm going to go a little bit deeper into this. First of all, let's confirm a couple of things. What John is talking about when he's saying his minimum doubling point, that's what's called the doubling window. And if you go into XG, you can get these numbers, analyze cube information, and here you are. It shows the double point, which also is called the doubling window. The point at which red should give the cube is right there where John said, around 36%. So if he has more than 36%, you should double here. If it was a money game, as John said, your doubling point is 50%. Here, I switched it to money. So if you're winning by only the example that John gave where you were a 53% favorite, you're going to win twice as much overall if you double than if you don't double, if you're over 50%. So for money, it's a no-brainer that this would not be a double. In fact, this would be a beaver. And at many scores, it would not be a double. It would be a big blunder to double when you're only 40%. But how many people, just looking at the board, quickly realizing that you are an underdog here, would even think about doubling? Many people just roll automatically. And that's the major point of this video, is to show you that that you just cannot be on autopilot in a backgammon game, particularly in match score situations, and particularly when you get to the end, and particularly at redoubles. Now, how do you learn Neil's numbers? Well, Neil's numbers are published, and again, I have Neil's numbers. I've memorized them. They aren't that hard. It takes you a while to memorize them, but you can use them. But let's confirm Neil's numbers. You can go to Analyze and go to Cube Information, and let's confirm what John said. You can look at a match equity table and see, but he came up with a take point for blue of, what did you say,
30.8. Yeah.
30.8, and here it is, 30.9. Neil's numbers were developed quite a while ago, and they're still very, very good. We haven't changed Neil's numbers, even though these numbers have changed. And by the way, these numbers have changed because of Neil's new match equity table that Extreme Gammon is using. It has taken help from Neil. Neil was one of the original 3 beta testers for Extreme Gammon. It was Neil, Mochi, and myself that Xavier brought on to beta test, and he did a good job bringing me on because I helped him market it and sell a lot of them. And he did a good job bringing Mochi and Neil on because they added a lot of intellectual material to this, including these numbers and take points. So you need to know these take points. You need to do that computation. Now I'll go a little bit deeper. The very first thing that John did is in keeping with what every single one of our 10 teachers teach, and that's a doubling cube process that we teach every single time. The first thing you need to do is you need to know your opponent's take point and gammon values. Here, gammon values don't matter. There's no gammons involved. And you need to know your own, and I do this at the beginning of every single game, and as soon as I took that 4 cube, I tried to start thinking about at what point I should be redoubling so I don't miss redouble. But then the very first thing that John did before he decided whether he should double is he decided whether or not his opponent should take or not. That's what Woolsey's law is. And very simply, John says, I'm not sure he's taking or not. If you're not sure, it's usually going to be a double. John will go further than that and go into the numbers, but I don't generally. If I'm not quite sure whether or not I would take or drop the cube, I'm giving that cube, and I'm going to let my opponent worry about whether he should take or not, because most of the time I'm going to be pretty close, even if it's wrong to double, if I'm not sure I would take. But lots of times if I'm not sure, that also tells me I haven't done enough work, because I should be sure. In positions like this, I should know and do what John did and come up with a number. But again, it wouldn't take long, knowing that you win the game 60% of the time I know I'm taking. Symbourge's law wouldn't apply very much in this position, but basically I put a name to something that I certainly didn't invent, but I don't think people named it. If I'm not quite sure whether I should double or not after everything is done, I put myself in my opponent's shoes and I ask myself how I would feel about getting the cube. And if I would hate it, then I'm going to double. And if it seems like an easy take and I'm not going to hate it, and I'm on the fence, I don't double. So I try to do what I think would aggravate my opponent the most. I always pretend that I'm playing Carter-Matted, and I want to aggravate my opponent as much as I can. And that's my rule of thumb that helps me with the cube. So the step-by-step process is Woolsey's law, and in order to determine whether or not you're going to take or not, you have to do the numbers. You have to see how often blue wins this game. Now, one other thing I want to mention, John was assuming, doing his numbers, that red did not roll a 2-1. In that one situation, red doesn't win every time that blue rolls a 1 after he misses. However, the times that you miss, if you had rolled a 2-1 here, the right play, of course, is to take 1 off and move 2 to 1, and then on your next roll, you only miss if you roll another 2-1. So it's pretty smart to do what John did, to ignore the thing that happens only 2 out of 36 times 2 out of 36. What percentage is that, John?
Well, let's see, it's 2 over 36 times 30% times another 2 over 36. So it's like the chance of all three is like about 1/10 of 1%. So it's hardly worth worrying about.
So why bother? That what John did was simplify things, and he just said, okay, this is going to be a dead cube situation. Now, I have one more question for John, and by the way, anybody who has questions about Woolsey's law and market loser theory, because we mentioned that, or anything else, you should be taking lessons. And I've got really 10 great instructors. Beginners lessons are $30 an hour. Up to expert lessons for $100 an hour, and online they're recorded, and we'll give you lots of tools, teach you how to use Neal's numbers, teach you how to use extreme gammon, and lots of things before you get to this point. So if you don't know those things, take lessons from somebody. There's other good teachers out there besides the 10 that I have, but I'm pretty proud of the 10 that we have around the world, and they include some of the best players in the world. But another thing that you need to know about these kinds of positions is that it changes so drastically at every different score and at every different cube level. If the cube were only at 2 instead of 4, you've got a whole completely different set of problems here, and I'm not going to get into that. And if the cube is at 8 and the score was, if you're playing a longer match, like playing a match to more than 7, last to 11, there are all kinds of other complexities, but the process is going to be the same every single time. Woolsey's law, and then figuring out whether you are above or below your doubling point or your doubling window in every situation. So I hope this was educational and enjoyable for you. It was for me. John, do you have anything more to add?
Just one other quick comment, and that is the reason that we only really worried about your minimum redoubling point is that this is basically a last roll of the game position. So by that I mean if this was, say, a mid to long race and you had the same 40% or so winning chances, it would be crazy to redouble this quickly because there's a lot of play left in the game. So the only time you really are going to be redoubling when it's right near the low end of your doubling window is in a last roll kind of a position. Okay. So I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, and that's a very good point. If it's not a last roll position, we did know what the doubling point here is. It came up to around 36%. But if your opponent's take point is so high, so low that he's nowhere near passing, you're not likely to lose your market. So that's one of the reasons that earlier in the game, where there were many more rolls to go, that red should wait, because he has nothing to gain by giving the cube now if your opponent's going to take the cube on the next roll anyway. So how to figure out when you have 40% winning chances and your doubling window is 36, at what point you do double and when you don't is it is a scientific approach, but it requires incredible math that I don't think even John does over the board in all those positions. Do you?
No, that's correct. Yeah, your doubling window at this score, when you're thinking about redoubling to 8, opens at around 36%, and it closes when white has the marginal take pass, which would be about 69% from your point of view. So 36 to 69 is your doubling window. And if it's the last roll of the game, position like this one basically is, you can double just any time your winning chances are above the minimum 36%. But if it's it's a long race where you have 40% winning chances, you definitely should not redouble.
All right, one more question that I had for you just occurred to me. I meant to ask it earlier. You said that if you're playing an equal player, it's certainly right to double here. But if you were playing a far inferior player, are you telling me that you would have knowingly made a 7% error and not given this cube if you were playing, for example, a very low open player who has a PR of maybe 8 or 9?
That is correct, yes. Because all these match winning chance numbers using Neal's numbers are based on 2 even opponents. So if you're the clearly better player, if you were to drop, your match winning chances are not 37%. They might be, 42% or 43%, and depending on how great the skill difference is between the 2 players. And so therefore that changes all the take points, and that changes all your minimum doubling points. And since it's pretty close to the low end of your doubling window against an even player, against a clearly inferior player, I would not redouble. Yeah.
So you'd have a real problem here in the dual where you're being judged on your PR and winning because you would be forced to make a mistake that you know would be a mistake if you were playing a clearly inferior player.
That's true. Yeah.
And that's a really good illustration of why there's been a lot of debate about the giant list and the BMAB list, which is recording people's PR, where there's really a difference between winning over the board and playing the best according to Extreme Gammon and PR. John is illustrating a point right here where he would clearly not make the best decision if he was playing. I'm not even going to ask you what you would do against me. I know I'm clearly inferior to you. Whether or not I'm inferior enough for you not to double me, I don't want to hear the answer. But I'm sure John faces players that it is even possible in the open division that there might be a player or two who's worse than me, where John would clearly pass, and I'm sure he would start having a problem at players at my level or above. So that's another thing that makes this game and match play so wonderful and so complex, and another reason why we shouldn't put that much emphasis strictly on PR. That's why I admire 2 kinds of players, the ones that play at the very, very low PRs all the time and the ones that win more. And you really got to look at a combination of both. And if I ever could name a person who I think is a great combination of both, it's John O'Hagan. So thank you so much, John, for doing this, for explaining this. And for everybody watching, again, email me if you have questions, if you want a written copy of John's thinking, if you want a written copy of Neal's numbers. And, of course, if you're interested in pursuing very, very advanced lessons, I would recommend John O'Hagan, Steve Sachs, Perry Gartner, Stick, Dennis Culpepper, Michi. These are some of the Tobias Hellwig. I'm sure I'm not forgetting some. These are some of the members of our teaching crew that I make sure take on the players of the higher levels to teach at these very high levels. And if you're a lower level player, they also teach those players as well. And we have other teachers, including myself, that will teach intermediates and low open players and below. So let us know if you're interested, and you can see that there is a lot more to this game than most people know or understand, and we can see why John is rated as one of the top players in the world. Thank you, John, and hope we'll do some more videos like this in the future.
Sounds good.